Frid älskade vänner, välkomna till dagens uppdatering. Ja, det är många som före oss har sett faran med Let It Rain. Let It Rain kom ju in 1948 och det handlar alltid om att Gud evolveras i församlingen så att säga, så att den sista tidens församling är med om något jättestort, stora väckelser, andeutgjutelser och så vidare. Den här läran förkastades av hela amerikanska pingströrelsen 48. Den gömde sig och kom tillbaka och nu heter den New Order of Let It Rain, Branham med flera. Det här är det som ligger till grund för den rörelse som vi kallar för NAR eller New Apostolic Reformation, som naturligtvis inte är Guds väg utan en ny väg. Det är inte Guds gamla evangelium och Guds gamla väg utan en ny väg och ett nytt evangelium. Här väntar man alltid på nästa stora drag från Gud, och så fort det blixtrar till av någon falsk eld någonstans så flyger man dit från alla håll för att ta del av detta. Och det har ju med deras lära att göra, alltså att man kan ta emot genom handpåläggning då kraft och föra det vidare. Det här är ju österländskt tänkande. Och nu får man höra att vi ska nå till den kritiska massan. Det betyder att få ett genombrott då, en stor väckelse som ska drabba miljarder, hela länder, hela städer och så vidare. Och många tror att detta är en banbrytande rörelse då, som ska ta hela världen med storm. Och följer man den och den är fel så missar man ju troligen att göra Guds vilja överhuvudtaget. För Guds vilja och Guds verk, det är ett väldigt tyst verk som sker i hjärtat på dem som följer honom på den smala vägen. Så är det ju. Det är ett djupt verk i hjärtat och det rapporteras knappast om i kristen media. Utan i kristen media är det bara buller och bång som räknas. Om sanningen ska fram så är inte mainstream kristenhet intresserade att följa med på den här urgamla vägen. Mantraordet sedan Let It Rain startade är alltid att nu gör Gud någonting nytt och nu kommer det en väldig andeutgjutelse. Och det var ju precis vad man sa på den här konferensen i Kalmar. Vi är väldigt frimodiga vänner eftersom Gud har talat om för oss vilken tid som vi lever i och att man nu överger den gamla vägen och rör sig in på ett område som är livsfarligt. Uppenbarelser som man påstår är från Gud som långt ifrån är bibliska. Korsbärande helgelse och smala vägar och trånga portar saknas fullständigt på denna nya väg som presenteras av dessa nya apostlar och profeter i NAR. Man vill inte lyssna till sanningen, utan nu väljer man att bedöma det budskap som kommer ifrån dessa falska profeter som profeterar helt enligt Let It Rain som äkta. Och tar man emot detta så blir ju sådana budskap som vi står för och många med oss, det blir ju väldigt dåligt. Det blir ju tråkigt att vi alltid får stå upp då och tala emot denna väldiga väckelse som kommer. Ja, det är ju inte meningen vi ska tala emot någon äkta väckelse. För det tror vi också kommer, men det här kommer först. Man vill alltid ha något nytt att följa. Och man vill göra stora upplevelser och naturligtvis så vill ju människan alltid vara på ett högre plan och alltid höra från Gud. Och man har olika metoder då för att göra det här. Som tur var har vi vänner som har lämnat New Age och som är väldigt insatta i det här. För att vi känner särskilt en vän som har varit ganska uppsatt, eller ska jag säga, i den här rörelsen. Och de nya metoderna som de lär ut är alltså exakt samma rörelse, samma metoder som de fick lära sig i New Age. Och vill du veta en annan sak? De fick även höra att de skulle infiltrera kristenheten med denna lära. Det var väl intressant, för det är precis det som pågår just nu. Men hur många ser det egentligen? Det är alltså ren New Age att påstå att vi har fått en ny kraft och ett mandat att skifta atmosfär över olika områden för att inta nya territorier för Guds rike. Man har till och med gått så långt att man följer ley lines och man smörjer olika pinnar och sätter upp, och så proklamerar man territoriet under Jesu Kristi blod. Ja, det här kan man faktiskt göra, och det här är helt ockult, det står inte i Bibeln. Det här är ren New Age-lära, att be ut på det här sättet och tala ut ord som du tror är skapande för att inta samhällets 7 berg. Detta är villfarelsens ande. Lyssnar du till den här nya vägen, följer dessa nya råd och nya läror, kommer du att gå mot en katastrof. Inte väckelse. Eller om vi skulle kunna säga så här: väckelsen leder till en katastrof. Det är precis vad det kommer att göra. För det här är en ockult väckelse. Jesus Kristus pekade ut vägen och riket som inte är av den här världen. Johannes 18:36. Vi ska inte dras in i denna gnostiska rörelse som hela tiden talar om att göra skillnad och skifta atmosfär där du är, istället för att peka på den smala vägen och följa Jesus och göra lärjungar och leda dem på sanningens väg, den urgamla vägen, inte den nya vägen. Kommer det lite klipp här, och Gud välsignar alla, och ta er till detta, läs om Let the Rain och förstå att detta är Satans schematiska metod och plan för att till slut föra kristenheten ihop med New Age-tankar, för det stämmer precis. Och läran du kan ta reda på heter Manifested Sons of God. Gud välsignar alla att vandra på den smala, urgamla vägen. Amen.
Illusion again. In London, Jonathan Spire, who I interviewed last week, he's in the UK right now, and he was posting about the protests that go on in London all the time against Israel that are pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas. So this front page of the Daily Telegraph yesterday: London is now a no-go zone for Jews. London, central London. One of the ministers in the UK government has said extremist acts have been normalized in Britain. This government must move faster to keep us safe. The Hamas attacks of October 7th will come to redefine our era, he says. Not since 9/11 have extremist networks been as emboldened. Anti-Semitism is skyrocketing. Inflammatory and borderline criminal rhetoric widely shared on social media. A sense that the terrorism threat is rising. Protests becoming ever more vociferous, with From the River to the Sea beamed onto the side of Big Ben during a vote on Gaza. Members of Parliament more fearful for their safety than ever. The Prime Minister last week pointed to a shocking increase in extremist disruption and criminality. He was right. Now he needs policies that meet the scale of the challenge. And so they're talking about this. Now, even in the Conservative Party in the UK, they're divided over the definition of extremism, because it may bring in trans activists and Christians, traditional Christians, will get caught up in the crackdown on Islamists. And it's a conundrum. So here's a picture of thousands march in London calling for ceasefire as aid heads to Gaza. You remember? And then this is true in the UK. Benny Gantz went on a tour. He's part of the war cabinet. There was a lot of people upset in the UK about, or in Israel about, he's going to the United States, he's going to the UK, he's talking about what to do in Gaza, that type of thing. And so I personally think what they're trying to do is they're trying to drive a wedge into the government, and they're sort of recognizing Benny Gantz as the shadow prime minister of Israel because they think he can be controlled more than Netanyahu. And they don't like Netanyahu. You heard what Biden had to say. He had one more thing he had to say about that. A lot of wars and rumors of wars. The Institute for National Security Studies. These are the people. There's a big controversy in Israel right now. Netanyahu's at fault. The IDF is at fault. Everybody's at fault. It's the right wing's fault. It's the left wing's fault. And there's plenty of blame to go around for what happened on October 7th. But the INSS, by the way, they were an organization that said, oh, we just need to have a nice technologically superior army, and they'll be able to take care of everything. Well, that didn't work out, did it? Smaller armed forces, more technology aware. So here's this morning, Hezbollah fired 35 rocket barrage. Is there going to be a war in the north? It appears that it's heading that way. Of course, there's this problem in the Houthis down in the Red Sea. It's disrupting shipping all over the place. You can see the darker red lines show that that's how shipping has changed. We also have the problem in the Panama Canal. I don't really have time to go into that. The Wall Street Journal has a really good video on that. They have a drought. And so they use some freshwater lakes. Been a lot of growth in Panama. The lakes are getting drained by people who want it for drinking water. And it's become a problem. So for example, here's a report from the Wall Street Journal, someone who runs a general store near one of the lakes that's used to supply water. By the way, when a ship goes through the Panama Canal, it's like 120, for each lock, it's like 120 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water to raise or lower the ship. And that water's gone. Can't be used for water or anything. They can't pump seawater in there because they're freshwater lakes. It's very unique among canals. And so now they're having to reduce traffic. And this lady says, listen, under the drought, the lake she lives on is receded from the dock. Water is available only every other day from 7 to 9 a.m. Those days, she spends all those hours scrambling to fill tanks and jugs with water for drinking, washing, and flushing toilets. So much for, they paved Paradise and put up a parking lot. And then they drained all the water, too, I guess is the way it goes. So Panama Canal, so shipping is disrupted everywhere. Russia's buying drones, making drones, buying drones from Iran. This continues to be a problem. The border area there, that's the blue outline, is Lebanon border. About 60 to 80,000 people have evacuated that area. They can't live there. And the head of Alma wrote a letter to Amos Hochstein, who's out running around. I mean, here's, I think, an article. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein lands in Lebanon as truce pressure mounts. And so Zarif Zahavi, or one of the other people from Alma, wrote an open letter to Amos Hochstein that I got a copy of it in an email there that says, Ambassador Hochstein, or Envoy Hochstein, how do you expect us to live with this? What do you expect? I mean, here's just 3 videos side by side of just the other night in northern Israel in the Upper Galilee. That's Iron Dome knocking down these missiles that are fired. So it's getting them, but they have 150,000 rockets. And so these people at INSS, they just don't really understand. And so everybody's fighting and arguing. So the INSS people are more of the establishment types that think, IDF has been doing great. It's the administration, it's the Netanyahu government. And there's a big controversy in Israel right now. Nobody wants elections, but everybody wants to win the war, then have elections. That's what I think everybody wants. This is a good article from 2006 in the foreword in praise of the double standard, talking about Israel didn't do so great, they didn't think at the time, in the war of 2006, the Second Lebanon War. And what are they going to do this time? And so there's a big controversy about, is Israel able to handle this? So I'm going to jump to this. Hang on. I need to turn down the sound. This is Gadi Taub and a General Brick. Hang on here. Yeah. I need to fast forward because you don't want to listen. You don't want me to play all 36 minutes, and it's translated. So the general's talking about the state of tanks and that type of thing. He was a tank commander. He's a retired general, and he's been warning people for years, you're not prepared for a war. We need more people. We need more equipment. And everybody's telling him, just shut up, General. You're retired. Go away. And so this is translated. I went to the outpost 24 hours. I talked to the soldiers. They say they don't have the night vision equipment when they are sitting at the lookout at the post watching at night. They don't look at anything they don't see, so they are on their smartphones. I found out that they do not do exercises for the outpost. I found that Gad Ashkenazi, this chief of staff, he's now in the war cabinet, has a very large force in canceled the territorial brigades, which are a reserve in the rear. So what happened was that any company of 70 people in a company outpost on the northern border received a much larger section of scanning from 5 miles to 10 miles. That means they doubled the amount of work, reduced the amount of people, and inside the outpost there were situations where there were 30 people because they went on vacation and the next cycle did not arrive, and they were responsible for 10 miles and nothing happened. Everything was a bluff. I presented this to Lieberman, Avigdor Lieberman, who was the defense minister, and he just goes on for like 40 minutes with Gadi Taub. So go to Israel at War on Rumble, and you can watch this whole thing. Now, this is a translation of Hebrew, and he's saying, listen, we're not ready for war in the north. We're barely getting by in the south. We haven't gone into Rafah. And he goes, and if we don't go into Rafah and finish this, we're done. It has to be done. We cannot
into space with the help of Russia. The leader of the Houthis wants to be the next Nasrallah. It seems that the Houthis do not hesitate to pollute their own backyard and the entire Red Sea. The US threatens, we will do to them what we did to Iraq. I'm Mati Shoshani, and this is what happened this week in our neighborhood. We start today with Iran, making another stride in its space program with the help of its ally, Russia. The Iranian satellite, Palace 1, was launched from a base in Russia, about 8,000 kilometers east of Moscow. The US condemned the launch, stating that it was a clear indication of the deepening military partnership between Iran and Russia. With Iran and Russia, it seems every small step is a giant leap backwards for humankind. In Yemen, the leader of the Houthis, Abd al-Malik Badr al-Din al-Houthi, has been making headlines with his speeches becoming increasingly similar to those of Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. But unfortunately, he also follows in Nasrallah's footsteps when it comes to terrorism. This week, the Houthis were also responsible for an ecological crisis in the Red Sea. 2 missiles hit a ship carrying 41,000 tons of fertilizer, causing pollution in a 29-long-kilometer area. The ship was on its way from the United Arab Emirates to Bulgaria when it was attacked by Houthi forces in the Gulf of Aden. The Houthis really went the extra mile, or kilometer for sticking to metric, to ensure their environmental impact matches their humanitarian one. In response, the US has launched attacks on areas under Houthi control in Yemen and destroyed 7 mobile anti-ship cruise missiles that were ready to be launched towards the Red Sea. And now to our main story of today. Has the war been good for the Israeli economy? Traditionally, some argue that it stimulates economics, with government spending on weapons, infrastructure, and equipment acting as a catalyst for private sector economic activity, leading to job creation and economic growth. The classic example often cited is the United States' emergence from the Great Depression, marked by then President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal program during World War II. But those who say that forget one crucial thing. The war that fueled America's economic boom happened outside of its borders. The same can't be said for Israel, currently embroiled in a conflict against Iranian-backed terrorist organizations Hamas and Hezbollah. Rockets rain down on cities, civilians evacuate, schools close, and jobs vanish. This is not an external conflict. This is a battle within, posing unique challenges to Israel's economic stability. Large numbers of civilians have fled their homes near the borders with Lebanon and the Gaza Strip, seeking refuge in already crowded cities closer to the center of the country. Tens of thousands of children are left without access to formal education, some resorting to makeshift classrooms in hotel conference rooms or private homes. Israel's sea and airports face attacks, disrupting supply chains for both imports and exports. Industries like construction and agriculture that are heavily reliant on foreign workers experience a sharp decline, as most of them have left due to the war. Terrorist attacks disrupt lives, especially impacting the tourism sector, a significant employer of hundreds of thousands of Israelis. Now, what's the unique problem Israel faces in this war? It fights not only for its security, but against an economic downturn that threatens the fabric of its society. The Central Bureau of Statistics paints a grim picture, revealing a 19.4% shrinkage in Israel's gross domestic product, or GDP, in the fourth quarter of 2023. This surpasses the 30% drop in GDP during the second quarter of 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic prompted a nationwide lockdown. The war has already cost the Israeli economy as much as 255 billion shekels, according to the CBS report. So what's the immediate aftermath of such economic upheaval? Jobs disappear as businesses close. Consumer spending plummets. Investment and trade drop. And large companies relocate their operations out of the country. All of this leads Israel's government to borrow heavily to finance the war while covering unemployment and other benefits for the population. International credit rating agencies respond by downgrading Israel's investment profile, making everything more expensive and challenging. And if all of that wasn't enough, while Israel battles to remove Hamas terrorists from Gaza, we also face the threat of Hezbollah in the north, with a far more deadly missile arsenal menacing the civilian population of the north. The IDF estimates that in a large-scale conflict with Hezbollah, as many as 8,000 rockets a day could target Israel. The entire country would be in range, posing a severe risk to both civilians and the economy. Many of Hezbollah's rockets have guidance systems allowing precise targeting of military bases and key infrastructure like electrical power plants and water pumping stations. The repercussions for the civilian population could be dire, eclipsing by far the economic toll of the war against Hamas. And if there was any doubt, the war on terror is costly, and this is where Israel needs its friends and allies, like Marshall Whitman, spokesman for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, who recently said, as Israel is battling to remove Hamas terrorists from Gaza, Hezbollah, with a far more deadly missile arsenal, is threatening civilian populations in the north. It is imperative that Israel immediately receives the necessary resources to defend against these threats." End quote. So how does this war impact Israel's interconnected economy with neighboring countries and the Palestinian Authority-administrated cities in Judea and Samaria? Over 200,000 Palestinians from Palestinian Authority-administrated cities work in Israel and in Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria, or I should say they worked prior to October 7th. Israel exports significant volumes of goods and services to those cities, as well as to Jordan and Egypt. The war prompted Israel to restrict the entry of Palestinian workers, causing a massive slowdown in the sector reliant on this labor. Decreased income for Palestinians resulted in reduced spending on Israeli goods and services. Jordan and Egypt quietly decrease consumption of Israeli goods and services, while Egypt suffers an income drop due to the Houthi rebels supporting Hamas by firing on civilian ships in the Red Sea. Shipping companies avoid this route, bypassing the Suez Canal and depriving Egypt of transit fees. In short, it's a lose-lose situation for everyone who's involved. All these factors lead to an undeniable conclusion. The war, forced upon Israel by the Hamas massacre of October 7th, 2023, has not been good for the economy. Jobs vanish, businesses close, consumer spending drops, and investments and trade decline. The hope for a rebound, when the fighting stops, is shadowed by the ever-present threat of more intense and destructive conflicts, especially with Hezbollah in the north. So does Israel have a plan for economic recovery? The Central Bureau of Statistics suggests a 19.4 shrinkage in GDP, indicating a need for strategic intervention. As the war in Gaza winds down, there is hope for a modest recovery in the first quarter of 2024. Rockets fired into Israel's south decreased, and IDF reserves returned home. However, multiple factors continue to drag on the economy, with a looming threat of a larger war in the north. Construction and agriculture, both reliant heavily on foreign workers, have seen sharp declines. The tourism sector, once thriving, is on the verge of collapse. Even if the conflict remains contained, rebuilding Israel's economy to pre-war levels will require time and concentrated effort. So this is where being a startup nation faces the test. We would have to reinvent ourselves and find new resources. Necessity is the mother of reinvention. After all, in the face of an economic downturn, Israel's government is taking strategic interventions to stabilize the economy and promote growth. The Ministry of Finance is working on a comprehensive plan to support businesses and households, including grants, loans, and tax relief. The Bank of Israel is taking measures to maintain financial stability and ensure the flow of credit to the economy. The government is also working to attract foreign investment and promote exports. And one final thought. If we've learned anything from the past wars Israel has faced, it is not wise to bet against Israel. That's all for this week. I'm Mati Shoshani. Please continue to follow us to find out what God is doing in our neighborhood. And I hope you live in a calmer neighborhood than ours.
Jesus, med dig vill jag leva här. Jag vill följa dig steg för steg i tro. Du är ju livet ditt eviga. Snart i himmelens land jag skall få bo. Jag har funnit en skatt som lagts i lerkärr. Den är med världen något här på jord. Du har tecknat mig i dina händer. Jag är ren ty du i mitt hjärta bor. Golgata verket jag vilar på. Det har öppnat en väg till himmelen. Vila, förlossning och frid du får. Du som längtar och söker, käre vän. Jesus säger, se allt jag har gjort färdigt. Kom och mottag och ät utav Guds ord. Tänk att Jesus har mig funnit med dig. Jag har glädje och frid i Jesus år. boja och band, du kan bli fri. Friköpt du är i hans dyra blod. Han vill lösa dig helt och säger du. Halleluja, för segern du har vunnit. Tack för kraften du ger för varje dag. Tack att bojor och band har försvunnit. Tack för blodet som rann på Golgata. Halleluja, för segern du har vunnit. Tack för kraften du ger för varje dag. Tack att bojor och band har försvunnit. Tack för blodet som rann på Golgata.